Deals are being lost because you're selling the numbers to your potential investors and not the narrative. When you look at a deal, you've got to take into consideration, why is this a good deal? And this is what I'm going to start asking you when you send me over, an offer. Why is this a good deal? Why the guy who sent me the 4 LOIs this morning that went out in cookie cutters, like, okay, have you spoken to the broker? Has he told you why this is a good deal? Has he told you where the potential is for this property? And have you reflected that potential in your cash flow analyzer? Let me show you what I mean. So when you analyze a property and you're sitting there looking at the numbers, do you just stick the numbers into the boxes where they go, or do you use those numbers or change the numbers to tell the story? Do you use the numbers to tell the narrative? That's what people are lacking. How can I use the numbers to tell the narrative? So first thing, let's take a look at this. Many of you come to me and say, "Hey, where do I put the initial improvements? We're gonna rehab all of these units. We're gonna put $4,000 per unit into the property. Where do I put that in the cash flow analyzer?" Well, okay, I'll show you where it goes, and this is where it goes. Take a look at this. You've all seen this before. It's right on the very first page, the input data page, and there it is. If you look here under the initial improvements, if you're going to rehab the property to the tune of $4,000 per unit, and you're going to raise all that money initially, you're going to put it right there. Great. What does that do to your cash-on-cash return in the first year? It kills it. Right. But why are you putting $4,000 into each unit? Why? Because you are trying to increase the rents. Because you know that your rents are so low, but all you have to do is put a new shine on those places, and you'll be able to increase the rents by $100 per unit per month. Okay, great. So my question to you is, if you tell me that you're going to do some initial improvements or some CapEx right away at the beginning, because this is a repositioning property or a value add property, are you just sticking numbers into that box without changing this page? Take a look at this page. We've all seen this page. Oh, Alana. Oh, for shame, for shame. She just picked on me because she knows how much I love IKEA. I was there this weekend. I was there at 10 o'clock on Sunday. Okay, fine. My son thinks IKEA is the 7th level of hell, and he refuses to go. All right, so take a look at this. So you go and you put $4,000 per unit into the property. So what happens to the rents? Well, the reason why you're doing that is your rents are going to go up every year. So look at what you have to do is take a look at this annual lease rate. Let me get here. You have to increase the how much money you're charging people every single year. So in the first year, and this is something you might have to calculate out separately and put in the percentages here, but if you're going to buy this property and rehab it, your rent's going to go up in the first year. So you're going to put the increase in the rental rate right there, the 5%. In year 3, well, it's not going to go up 5. It's only going to go up 4. And then year 4, and by 5, it becomes a performing asset, a stabilized asset, and the rental increases are back down to 2%. Now that number is going to show very, very well when you go look at the cash flow analysis on the 4th tab. And this is what you have to sell to your investors. They want to know, well, why should I buy this property? Here's why. We're going to take that initial improvement money, plow it back in the property, and look what we can do with the rents. Look what we can do with the rents when they, 5 years from now. That's why this is a good deal. Okay, great. Now, when you analyze a property, do you modify the vacancy as you lease up the property? Now, remember, folks, look at this. We all see this screen, and most people put the vacancy number in there, right there where it says 10%, and they keep it standard. 10% all the way through. 10%, 10%, 10%. Well, if you're doing a rehab, is that really how it's going to work? No, you're going to, I'll tell you guys, to be totally honest with you, a vacancy on a rehab is going to increase. The vacancy is going to increase in the early years. and then you're going to start to go through the marketing increase, and then your vacancy is going to come down. You're going to increase the marketing. You're going to clean up every one of the units, and then you're going to start increasing it. But you're going to increase it at a higher rent. So we're telling a story here. We're telling a story to a potential investor about what's going to happen on this property. You buy this property today, we're getting $700 a month for rents. But when we're done with it, 5 years from now, the rents are going to be at $1,000. And that's $300 increase at a 10 cap. And this is what happens to the property. Now we're telling a whole story about what's going on instead of just letting the numbers be static and just sit there. Okay? So, how's everybody doing? Is this, is this like a little, do you feel like the principal's calling you out a little bit, or some of you think like, geez, I really do need to be doing this. You need to have this story. And so every time that we talk about these numbers, every time you send me over an offer, I'm going to be asking you, what's the story? Tell me the narrative. I want to know what's going on. Oh, Quay, thanks. I appreciate that. I need to know why you're buying this property. You better tell me the story, where it's not going to throw stuff up against the wall. And, the reason why I'm really pressing this is Jim Richardson, I feel kind of missed out on 2 deals he should have got. And maybe I wasn't diligent enough. Maybe I should have looked at the numbers a little bit, a little bit harder for him. But I think he should have got those 2 deals. And I don't want to see that happen again. So this is why we're having this conversation. All right. Now, what happens is over here, look at where it says vacancy rate 10%. If you click that little white radio button, use rate for all years, which is what we always do, you're going to see a 10% vacancy every single year. But if you click the other button where it says enter vacancy rate per year, and then you hit the white button that says enter annual rates, it takes you over to this property, this tab, where you can then go in there, and it's done kind of on the concession rate. There are a couple different ways you can do this. I just screen captured this particular one, so you can take a look at it. But what you do is you go in there and build it out. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So this is where the vacancy rate comes in. Brian, hey, Brian, go ahead. Ask your question. You want to unmute yourself and ask it?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Charlie, sorry to interrupt here. You mentioned Jim Richardson, and I know Jim's been on the past couple Monday night calls. Seems like he's getting a lot of action, getting a lot of offers in, seeing some great properties. I know he had mentioned that he had seen one in Lancaster that was great. It sounded like exactly what we're all looking for. It seemed like it had all of the criteria. You mentioned he didn't get the last 2 deals, and I wanted you to maybe get some context there. Did he not get the last 2 deals because he didn't tell the story well to the investors, or because the offer wasn't right, because there was more to the story or more context and the offer should have been altered?
I think, in my opinion, and if Jim is here and he can unmute himself, that'd be great. But I think what really happened is we were probably a little bit too conservative on our numbers, because we didn't look at what the true potential of what this property could do, and therefore we didn't take that into consideration in our upside. And so we kind of, went out with the standard numbers that we're kind of used to. So I think we could have been a little bit more aggressive on the numbers to make them work. Jim is keeping, great records as to, what goes out and what gets accepted and what numbers where he needs to be. He also mentioned, I think, some of the terms were a little bit more aggressive as well. And that's something that I will talk about at the end of this conversation. It's not part of the PowerPoint presentation, but I think we do need to start talking about terms, and maybe changing up some of the terms and seeing what happens in that regard. So I think if Jim were here, he'd be able to give us a lot more information on exactly why he didn't get it. But I think it's believe me, he's so close. The reasons why he didn't get the deal were like $50,000. I mean, it really, he's so close. So, it's something that, we've got to take into consideration, because we just can't all be constantly sitting on the sidelines. We got to get in the game. We got to figure out what it's going to take to get some of these offers accepted. And then, then we move on to plan B. Let me see. Just depends on the market. Yeah. If the property is to be repositioned, what vacancy rate? Well, if the property is going to be repositioned, what vacancy rate is acceptable? It really, ultimately, you've got to figure out: are you buying this thing and using some of the cash flow in it to keep the property alive, or are you repositioning this property to just kick everybody out and then plow money into the rehab and then release it up as quickly as you possibly can and at higher rents? So there is no vacancy rate that's acceptable. Okay. Because you, Larnie, have to be able to tell me the story. Why is the vacancy rate that you're choosing as acceptable? Why does it make sense? Why should I invest with you? And you have to be able to sell me the sizzle. All right. So that's what we have to do with with these properties. Okay. Let's see. What do you mean about aggressive terms? Okay, Quay, let me get into that in just a second. Quay, make sure that as soon as my PowerPoint's over, I want to start talking about aggressive terms. Yeah, I'll give you some specific examples. Now, it says, when you analyze a property, do you sell the internal rate of return? Do you talk to an investor about all the money that's coming back to him? See, if all you're talking about is a double-digit cash-on-cash return, you're not even mentioning what the internal rate of return is. You're not mentioning about how you're paying down the mortgage. You're not mentioning, any other savings that you have within the property that's going right back to the investor. You're just talking cash-on-cash return. Well, remember, guys, not every investor cares about cash-on-cash return. That may shock some of you, because you're looking at this property at multifamily as being a cash flow property, and that's all true. But sometimes what we're trying to do is increase the capital appreciation on the property by increasing the rents as quickly as we can. And in that particular case, we're better off taking our money that the property generates, plowing it back into the property, and then increasing the NOI that way. And when we do that, those cash-on-cash returns are going to be very, very low. Oh, well, then nobody will want to invest in my property. Well, yeah, because you didn't tell the story the right way. You have to tell them that we're not buying this property for a cash-on-cash return. If you need income, you don't want to be in this deal. You want to be in this deal because I can take your $100 and turn it into $700 in 3 years. Does that sound good to you? Oh, yeah, that sounds really good. Okay, well, then that's what we're going to do with this property. All right, so that's how you have to figure out what it is that we're looking for. For those of you that don't know where to find the internal rate of return numbers on the cash flow analyzer, turn to the CFA page, look down at the financial measurements number. Now, we all know where the cash-on-cash return before taxes is, and here this property is looking to show it's 12%. But look at the internal rate of return before taxes. That's the line right below that, and it's 28.45%. Now, how could that possibly be? If we're getting a 12% cash-on-cash return, but we end up with a 28% internal rate of return in the first year, how many people can tell me how that could possibly happen? I'm waiting. Let's see all the smarty pants is on here. Well, yeah, but in 1 year, appreciation, that's true. I want to know a little bit more specific about appreciation. How, if we sold a property at the end of the first year and realized a 28.45% return, what did we do right? All right. I am going to have to answer this. Somebody else doesn't come up with it. Yeah, you bought it at the right price. You bought it below market. You bought the property below market. All right. So hold on 1 second here. Let me just. All right. So that is why you're seeing the internal rate of return. Because remember, guys, if you're just selling the Holy Trinity, how do those three factors come into play if you bought this property really low? You don't see it until you sell it. So those Holy Trinity factors are meaningless. You never even know if you're buying the property for the right price. All right, let's move on here. See right there, there's the internal rate of return. Jumping along here. All right, so my question to you all is, are you selling the sizzle? Are you selling the numbers? And are you selling the narrative? So if you're sitting down in front of an investor and he says, you should invest in this deal because over the next 5 years, we are going to rehab each one of the units. And when we rehab each one of the units, we're going to be able to increase the rents 15% just to bring them up to the market levels. We're going to increase the occupancy to 95%, which is exactly where the submarket is. We're going to be able to reduce the expenses to market rent rates because this owner has been running this property like it's an ATM and he hasn't done anything right. And we're going to, just by using rules of thumb for what a property's expense ratio should be, we can reduce the expenses by 10% of this property. That means that these changes over the next 5 years will result in an average annual rate of return in excess of, boom, answer the question. And that's the potential that we see in this property. We're telling the story of this deal. We went from just looking at static numbers on a spreadsheet to bringing this deal to life. So when you're looking and analyzing these properties and figuring out what you're going to make your offer on, you got to think about, how am I going to sell this thing to my investors? And that's going to be that you're going to be able to show all of those numbers and how you do that right there in the cash flow analyzer. But you got to tell the story. All right. And then what you do is you turn to the guy, after you say that, he says, how much can we put you down for? What's it going to take to put you in this car today? All right. That is how it works.